The council chamber erupted in chaos as the final signature etched onto the declaration, ink still gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. Ambassador Hale slammed his fist on the polished obsidian table, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. It's done. War's declared against the Krell Dominion. Every one of you just signed your own execution orders. He was the only human in the room, broad-shouldered and unyielding, his eyes scanning the 12 alien counselors, scaled reptilians, feathered avians, and silicon-skinned enigmas, who shifted uneasily in their seats. The avian delegate from the Quillari collective, Lyra, ruffled her iridescent feathers, her beak clicking in agitation. Bold words from a soft-skinned primate. The Krell have crushed empires before ours. This alliance was your humans' idea, your united front to reclaim the outer colonies. She leaned forward, talons scraping the table's edge, but Hale didn't flinch. He'd seen worse in the asteroid skirmishes, where one wrong calculation meant vaporization. Beside her, the reptilian Vorsak enforcer Grun hissed through jagged teeth. We signed because your Federation promised weapons, ships, strategies, not empty threats in a chamber. His tail thrashed, knocking over a datapad that clattered to the floor, its screen flickering with holographic maps of contested space. Hale picked it up without breaking eye contact, sliding it back toward Grun. Threats? Show us facts. The Krell don't negotiate after declarations. They exterminate signatories first. Look at the archives. Every war council they've faced ended in ash. Tension coiled in the air, thick as engine exhaust. Hale's mind raced through contingencies. He'd argued against this rushed vote for weeks, but human stubbornness and alien opportunism had pushed it through. Now, with the transmission beaming out to every allied world, there was no undoing it. Alarms blared suddenly from the chamber's comms panel. A priority alert from the orbital defense grid. Incoming vessels, the automated voice droned. Krell signatures confirmed. ETA 12 minutes. Lyra's feathers bristled fully now, her eyes widening. Impossible. They couldn't have intercepted the signal so fast. But Hale knew better. Krell quantum relays spanned light years and seconds. He activated his wrist comm, barking orders to the human contingent outside. Evacuate the non-essentials. Arm the delegates. We're not dying in here. Grun rose, claws flexing around his ceremonial blade while the others froze, their earlier bravado crumbling like dry sand. As the chamber doors sealed with a hydraulic hiss, Hale grabbed the declaration scroll, crumpling it in his fist. The first distant rumble shook the station, Krell boarding pods breaching the hull. This wasn't just war. It was personal now, their names etched not just on paper but in the stars as targets. Hale met Lyra's gaze, his voice steady. Follow my lead, or stay and sign your final regrets. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her feathers flattening against her skull as another tremor rippled through the chamber floor. The Quillari delegate was no stranger to boardings. Her people's skirmishes with raiders had honed her instincts. But this felt different. Heavier, like the station itself was exhaling in defeat. She nodded once, sharp and decisive, slinging her datapad over her shoulder like a weapon. Lead on, human. I've signed too many pacts to back out now. Hale didn't waste breath on thanks. He pivoted toward the side access panel, the one he'd mapped during the endless negotiation drudgery, prying it open with a grunt. Sparks danced from exposed conduits, illuminating the narrow service tunnel beyond, dimly lit conduits snaking like veins through the station's underbelly. Grun lumbered after him, the Krovan's bulk scraping the walls, his blade humming faintly as he powered it up. The others, Vex from the avian Silex and the diminutive Trell engineer, huddled at the rear, their breaths ragged echoes in the confined space. Stay tight, Hale ordered, voice low and clipped as he ducked inside. The air grew thicker, laced with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Krell hit the main docks first. We'll cut through engineering to the auxiliary bays. Lyra, you're on point for scans. Spot any breaches ahead. She activated her pad's interface, holographic readouts flickering to life in her palm. Signals jammed, but I read pressure drops 2 levels down. They're carving through like it's tissue. Her claws tapped furiously, rerouting what power she could to mask their signatures. A low vibration hummed underfoot, the kind that promised collapsing bulkheads if they lingered. Grun growled from behind, his voice a gravelly rumble. Fools, we should fight here. Honorable clash. But even as he said it, his free hand clamped onto Vex's shoulder, steadying the bird-like delegate who flapped his wings in panic, feathers shedding in a faint cloud. Not today, Hale shot back, squeezing through a junction where cables dangled like jungle vines. Honor gets you a grave. We get out, regroup, hit back smarter. He glanced over his shoulder, catching Trell's wide eyes, the little engineer's toolkit clinking against his belt. You rig a diversion. Overload the nearest vent shaft. Buy us time. Trell nodded, his forearms a blur as he jacked into a panel. On it. But if the Krell trace it... He trailed off, fingers dancing over wires, splicing a feedback loop that would scream false alarms across the grid. The tunnel shuddered violently, dust sifting from the ceiling and gritty curtains. Hale pressed on, the group's footsteps a muffled patter against the grating. Ahead, a faint red glow seeped through a grate. Emergency lights or something worse. Lyra held up a talon, halting them. Wait, motion sensors pinging. Boarding team maybe 50 meters starboard. Hale's mind raced, calculating angles. The Krell were brutal, their exosuits turning them into walking battering rams, but humans had edges they didn't. Adaptability, the refusal to die neat. He scanned the tunnel, spotting a disused maintenance drone wedged in an alcove, its chassis rusted but intact. Groon, your blade, slice the drone free. Trell, hotwire it to ram that grate. The Krovan obliged without argument, his energy blade slicing clean through the moorings with a sizzle. The drone clattered free, heavier than it looked. Trell swarmed over it, tools whirring, jury-rigging thrusters from scavenged cells. Crude, but it'll move. Aim it right, it'll breach and draw fire. Lyra's scans beeped urgently. They're closing. 20 meters now. I hear chanting? Krell were hymns. Hale hefted the drone's edge, muscles straining. Launch on my mark. They counted breaths in the stifling dark, the distant clamor growing, metallic thuds, guttural roars echoing like thunder in a barrel. 3, 2. Now, Trell slapped the activation node. The drone lurched forward with a mechanical whine, barreling toward the grate at erratic speed, its makeshift rams glinting. It smashed through in a shower of sparks and twisted metal, careening into the adjacent corridor. Shouts erupted, Krell voices barking in surprise as blaster fire lit up the breach like fireworks. Go! Hale surged ahead, the group piling through the new opening. They emerged into a wider hallway, conduits hissing steam, the air thick with ozone. Bodies of station security lay slumped against walls, armor scorched black. No time to mourn. Hale waved them toward a side ladder. Up to the base, move. But as they climbed, a guttural bellow shook the air. A Krell warrior rounded the corner below, towering and scaled, its plasma rifle cycling hot. It fired wild, bolts searing the ladder rungs inches from Groon's feet. The Krovan roared back, twisting mid-climb to loose a swipe of his blade that severed a support beam. It crashed down, pinning the attacker's leg in a screech of metal. Not enough, Lyra hissed, her pad beeping overload. More coming. Hale, your plan's fraying. He gritted his teeth, hauling Vex up the final rung. The avian delegate wheezed, wings trembling. We can't outrun them all. Won't have to. Hale's eyes locked on the bay doors ahead, sealed but promising escape pods. One more push. But deep down he felt the weight, the Declaration's ink still fresh, binding them to a fate they couldn't outrun yet. Hale slammed his palm against the bay door's access panel, the seal hissing open with a reluctant grind. Alarms wailed through the corridor behind them, a symphony of pursuit that echoed off the bulkheads. He shoved Vex through first, the avian's feathers ruffled and eyes wide with exhaustion, then turned to help Lyra, who clutched her malfunctioning pad like a lifeline. Groon brought up the rear, his massive frame blocking the doorway as he scanned the shadows. They're close. Too close. The escape pod bay stretched out before them, a dim cavern of curved walls lined with dormant capsules. Only 3 pods remained viable, their status lights flickering green amid the red haze of emergency lighting. Hale's mind raced. Pods for 4, but they'd need every second to launch without drawing the Krell right into the void. Split up? Lyra suggested, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. She jabbed at her pad, coaxing a partial schematic to life. 2 pods pair off. Increases our odds. Vex shook his head, talons scraping the deck as he steadied himself. No, united front or we fall divided. The Council's folly was isolation, don't repeat it. Hale glanced back as Groon wedged the door with a loose stanchion, buying them moments. The Krovan's muscles strained, veins bulging under his leathery skin. But the first plasma bolt scorched the frame, melting through the barricade like butter. Decide fast, human. Your ingenuity or our graves? Hale nodded, pointing to the central pod. All in one. Overload the others for distraction. Set them to false launches. Lyra, can your pad handle that? She hesitated, fingers flying across the interface. Maybe. It's glitching, but if I reroute the power grid... A spark jumped from the device, singeing her sleeve, but the schematic bloomed with new options. Got it, it'll draw fire, give us a window. Groon hauled open the central pod's hatch, the mechanism groaning under his grip. Inside, the cramped space awaited, seats for 4, controls humming faintly. Hale herded Vex and Lyra aboard, then climbed in last, sealing the door with a finality that twisted in his gut. As Lyra initiated the overload sequence, the bay erupted. The 2 decoy pods shuddered to life, their engines igniting in false starts that lit the chamber like twin suns. Plasma fire raked the walls, Krell roars mingling with the shriek of venting atmosphere. The pod lurched, thrusters firing erratically. Hale strapped in, gripping the manual override. Hold on. This is going to be rough. They blasted free, the station's hull peeling away behind them. But as the stars wheeled into view, a proximity alert screamed. Krell interceptors, sleek and predatory, vectoring in from the debris field. Vex leaned forward, peering at the viewport. They're not letting us go. That declaration? It painted targets on us all. Hale's hands tightened on the controls, plotting a desperate slingshot toward the system's gas giant. Then we make them regret it. Groon, arm the countermeasures. Lyra, eyes on that pad. Find us a blind spot. The Krovan grunted approval, loading flares into the pod's meager launcher. Tension coiled in the air, thick as the engine's rumble. They were alive for now, but the ink of that war declaration stained everything. Escape or not, the hunt had just begun. Hale yanked the pod's throttle back, the engines whining in protest as they skimmed the gas giant's upper atmosphere. Turbulence buffeted them like a living thing, flames licking the viewport in erratic bursts. The Krell interceptors held formation behind, their plasma drives cutting through the haze like knives. Blind spot incoming, Lyra called, her fingers flying across the datapad. Dive into the storm band. There's a magnetic eddy that scrambles sensors for 30 seconds. Vex strapped in tighter, his face pale against the red emergency lighting. 30 seconds? That's all we've got between us and becoming vapor. Groon rumbled from the countermeasures station, his massive Krovan frame wedged into the seat. Better than nothing. Firing decoys on your mark, Hale. The pod shuddered as gravity wells tugged at it, the giant swirling clouds a maelstrom below. Hale's jaw set. He'd flown worse in Sims, but this was real. The kind of real where one wrong vector meant pancaking into hydrogen seas. Mark now. Flares erupted from the pod's rear, blooming into false signatures that mimicked their heat trail. The interceptors veered, firing blind bursts that lit the clouds in violet flashes. For a heartbeat, the pod slipped free, diving into the eddy's embrace. Sensors went haywire, static snow on every screen, the stars blurring into nothingness. They're buying it, Lyra whispered, tracking the faint echoes. But her eyes narrowed. Wait, 2 are breaking off. Adapting already? Krell tech's too good. Hale cursed under his breath, wrestling the controls as the pod bucked. The storm's electromagnetic fury clawed at their shields, draining power faster than he liked. Alarms blared, structural integrity at 70%, life support flickering. They couldn't stay in this soup long. Vex unbuckled, grabbing a toolkit from the bulkhead. We need more than decoys. That declaration made us priority 1, they won't stop. He pried open a panel near the engine feed, sparks jumping as he rerouted auxiliary power. Groon, boost the exhaust vents. Make us look like a freighter wreck drifting in. The Krovan nodded, his claws deft on the unfamiliar human interfaces. Risky, could overload the core. Do it, Hale snapped, eyes locked on the viewport. One interceptor looped back, its scanners piercing the interference like a predator's gaze. The pod's hull groaned, a seam popping along the flank. Lyra leaned over Vex, pointing at the pad's readouts. If we vent plasma in a false burst, mimic an explosion, they might think we blew. Vex's hands moved faster, splicing wires with a makeshift clamp. Sweat beaded on his brow, but his voice stayed steady. On 3, Groon. Ready? The pod dove deeper, the clouds pressing in like a vice. Hale felt the weight of it all. The Council's hasty signatures, the war they'd ignited without a fleet to back it. No time for regrets. 3. A whoosh echoed through the cabin as exhaust vents fired, spewing ionized gas in a brilliant plume. The pod spun away, cloaked in the giant's fury, While the decoy plume expanded like a dying star, the lead interceptor banked hard, its weapons charging, then hesitated, sensors overwhelmed. But the second one pressed on, closing the gap. A warning shot grazed their shields, shearing off a sensor array in a spray of debris. The pod lurched, lights dimming. "Shields at 40, Lyra reported, her voice tight. "We can't take another hit." Hale plodded an ascent, fighting the pull. "Hold on, we're punching out." Vex sealed the panel, slumping back. "That buy us time?" The interceptor fired again, but the storm swallowed the bolt. For a moment silence reigned, broken only by the engine's strained hum. Then distantly the Krell ship veered off, joining its wingmate in pursuit of the ghost plume. Lyra exhaled. "They're chasing shadows. For now." Grun cracked his knuckles, a low growl escaping. "Good. But next time we hit back." Hale eased the pod toward clearer skies, the gas giant receding like a bruised eye. The hunt wasn't over. The Declaration's ink had marked them forever. But they'd clawed one breath from the void. Damage reports scrolled across the console. Hull breaches sealed, but fuel reserves critically low. They'd limp to the outer rings, maybe find an asteroid hideout. Vex met Hale's gaze, a grim nod passing between them. Survival wasn't victory, but it was a start. Hale's fingers danced over the controls, coaxing the pod through the asteroid field's jagged dance. Shards of rock loomed like forgotten teeth, each pass a gamble against the thruster's fading whine. Fuel gauges flickered red, a silent accusation. "Steady on that vector," Vex muttered from the co-pilot's seat, his eyes glued to the scanner. "We've got a pocket at bearing 247, dense enough to mask us if the Krell don't sniff it out first." Lyra strapped in tighter, her face pale under the cabin's harsh glow. "Mask us from what? That declaration's got every hunter in the sector baying for blood. We're not ghosts yet." Grun snorted, heaving a crate of emergency rations across the hold. His massive frame filled the narrow space, muscles straining against the straps. "Let 'em come. I've got charges prepped. One wrong move and we turn their fancy ship into scrap." The pod shuddered as it slipped into the asteroid's shadow, engines cutting to a whisper. Hale killed the mains, letting momentum carry them into the hollowed-out crevice, a natural cave pocked by millennia of impacts. Dust motes swirled in the viewport, settling like ash on a grave. They docked against the rough wall with a metallic groan. Vex popped the hatch first, mag boots clanking onto the regolith. "Air's thin but breathable. Scans show no hostiles, but power's spotty. We'll need to jury-rig the generators if we want heat." Inside the hideout, the air hung cold and stale, lit by emergency strips that buzzed like angry insects. Hale unloaded the med kit, his mind racing through checklists. The Council's war ink wasn't just words. It meant blockades, bounties, the whole damn galaxy closing in. They'd bought time, but at what price? The pod's hull patches held for now, but one micrometeor could undo it all. Lyra knelt by the console, patching into the asteroid's faint comm relay, trying to bounce a signal to our contacts on Epsilon. "If anyone's left loyal..." Her voice trailed off as static crackled, then a burst of garbled voices. Krell chatter close enough to raise the hairs on Hale's neck. "Shut it down," Grun growled, slamming a fist on the panel. Sparks flew and the line died. "You're painting a target on us." She shot him a glare, undeterred. "We need allies, not just hiding. That declaration signed our death, sure, but it signed theirs too if we play it right." Vex emerged from a side tunnel, hauling a salvaged power cell. Found this relic embedded in the wall. Old human make, pre-contact era. Might boost us, but it's finicky. One wrong connection and we fry the whole setup. Hale nodded, rolling up his sleeves. Human grit. That's what it boiled down to. Patching the unpatchable, turning junk into lifelines. He grabbed a toolkit, the weight familiar in his calloused hands. "Let's crack it open." Grun watched the scopes. "Lyra, keep that relay quiet till we juice it up." As they worked, the asteroid trembled faintly. A distant collision or something worse? Vex's hand steadied Hale's on the wiring, their breath sinking in the dim light. "Remember that run on Vega? We MacGyvered a shield from scrap. This is no different, but it was. The war's shadow loomed larger here in the void's quiet belly. One slip and the Council's certificate would claim them. The cell hummed to life, lights flickering brighter. For a heartbeat, relief washed through the chamber. Then the scopes lit up, 3 blips closing fast. Grun's laugh was a bark. "Company's here. Time to earn our breath." Hale slammed the toolkit shut, the metallic clang echoing through the chamber like a gunshot in the void. 3 blips on the scopes. Council hunters, no doubt, sleek interceptors cutting through the asteroid belt like knives through silk. Groon's fingers danced over the controls, zooming in on the incoming signatures, his broad shoulders hunched in the flickering glow. 2 minutes out, tops, Groon growled, his voice a low rumble that cut the tension without breaking it. They're vectoring straight for our heat signature. That cell we just fired up? It's like a damn beacon. Lyra's hands flew across the relay panel, rerouting power with practiced flicks. Sweat beaded on her forehead, catching the emergency lights in tiny prisms. I can dampen it, but it'll take 30 seconds. We buy that time, or we dance. Vex leaned over Hale's shoulder, his eyes sharp as he scanned the makeshift wiring they'd jury-rigged from the power cell. The air hummed with the low throb of the asteroid's core, but now it carried an edge like the whole rock was holding its breath. No dancing, he said, his tone clipped, efficient. We use the debris field. Hale, you and Groon take the forward guns, old turret, but it'll spit enough lead to slow them. Lyra and I seal this chamber and prep the escape pods. If they board, we don't let them take the cell intact. Hale nodded, grabbing his harness and clipping it to the rail. The plan felt solid, born of too many scrapes and fringe space, but the stakes clawed at him. The Council's declaration wasn't just words. It was a noose tightening around every rogue op like theirs. One hit from those interceptors and the power cell shattered. Their shot at disrupting the war's supply lines gone. Worse, the crew scattered to the stars, hunted ghosts. They moved fast, boots magnetic clunking against the deck as the ship, more salvaged hull than vessel, groaned under acceleration. Groon powered up the turrets, the ancient servos whining to life, while Hale strapped into the gunner's seat. The scopes painted the hunters now. Angular shadows against the star field, engines flaring blue. First one's in range, Groon barked over the comm. Hale's fingers tightened on the triggers, the turret swiveling with a jerk. He fired, a burst of kinetic rounds lancing out, punching through a drifting rock fragment. The debris exploded in a silent bloom of shards, and the lead hunter veered hard. But not before a grazing shot rocked their hull. Alarms blared, red light strobing. Breach in the outer bay, Lyra's voice crackled through. They're launching drones, small fast. Vex is on it. Hale's world narrowed to the targeting reticle, sweat stinging his eyes. He led the second hunter, squeezing the trigger in a sustained arc. Round zipped out, one clipping the interceptor's wing. It spun, trailing sparks, but the third slipped past, closing on their flank. The ship shuddered again, harder this time, a direct hit venting atmosphere. Groon, cover me! Hale unstrapped, grabbing a breather mask and bolting for the corridor. The air grew thin, icy drafts whispering from the breach. He reached the outer bay just as Vex sealed a bulkhead, his face pale but set. Lyra was there too, welding a panel over a sparking console, the drone's buzz audible through the hull like angry wasps. One drone smashed through a weakened seam, its cutter beams slicing air. Hale dove, tackling it midair, the impact jarring his bones. It sparked and died under his boot, but two more swarmed in. Vex fired his sidearm, crack, dropping one while Lyra hurled a loose conduit pipe, jamming the other's thrusters. The chamber rocked violently. Outside, Groon's turret roared, claiming the damaged hunter in a fireball that lit the scopes like a newborn sun. But the third interceptor latched on, boarding clamps grinding against the hull. They're in, Groon shouted. 2 minutes to armory lockdown. Hale hauled himself up, chest heaving. The power cell room was one bulkhead away. If they reached it, the war's edge shifted back to the Council. We hold the line here, he said, voice steady despite the burn in his lungs. Vex met his gaze, nodding once, his hand brushing Hale's in a silent pact. They formed up, weapons hot, as the breach door buckled under plasma torches. The first Council trooper emerged, armored and relentless, but Hale was already moving, firing low, aiming for the joints. The shot connected, dropping the figure in a crumple of servos. More poured in, but the crew met them head-on, a blur of motion and grit. Lyra flanked left, her relay hack frying a trooper's visor. Vex rolled under fire, planting a charge on the clamps. Groon's heavy fire from the corridor pinned them, his barks of defiance echoing. Hale pushed forward, close enough to see the fear in a trooper's eyes behind the mask. Humans just like them, but chained to the declaration's lie. The charge blew, the interceptor shearing free with a screech. It tumbled into the debris, engines flaring uselessly. The remaining boarders faltered, retreating to their breaching pod. Hale fired the final shot, sealing the hatch. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of sealing foam and ragged breaths. The scopes cleared, no more blips. They'd held. But as Hale slumped against the wall, a sharp pain lanced his side, a shrapnel grazed from the blast. Hale gripped his side, blood seeping through his fingers, warm and insistent. The pain sharpened with each breath, but he forced himself upright, scanning the corridor for threats. The interceptor's wreckage still smoldered outside the viewport, a twisted memorial to their desperate stand. Lyra knelt beside him first, her medkit already open, hands steady despite the adrenaline crash. "Hold still, Captain. That's a nasty graze. Shrapnel from the blast." Her voice cut through the haze, cautious as ever, eyes flicking to the others for confirmation. Vex wiped sweat from his brow, his witty grin absent for once as he checked the bulkhead seals. "We bought time, but that pod's not the last. Sensors are lighting up, more signatures inbound." He slapped a panel, rerouting power with quick fingers, the hum of emergency lights flickering back to life. Grun lumbered over, his massive frame blocking the emergency glow, rifle slung low. Brave to a fault, he clapped Hale's shoulder gently for him before growling, "Patch him up. I'll cover the approach." The alien's eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the void beyond, where the enemy fleet loomed like shadowed predators. Hale nodded, biting back a curse as Lyra applied the sealant. The sting faded under her efficient touch, replaced by a dull throb. "Status on the core?" he asked, voice rough. They couldn't afford downtime. The Declaration's fallout had turned allies into hunters, and their ship, the Reliant, was the last free vessel in the sector. "Containment holding," Vex replied, terse, his fingers dancing over a makeshift console. "But the hack I pulled earlier? It's fraying. If they breach the outer hull again, we're venting atmosphere." He paused, glancing at Hale. "We need a better play than barricades." The group huddled closer, the air thick with the acrid tang of burnt wiring. Outside, the stars wheeled lazily, indifferent to the war's inkling. A council's hasty signatures dooming billions, including their own kind. Hale's mind raced, piecing together fragments. The rival factions' interceptors, loyal to the Declaration, closing in like wolves. Lyra sealed the wound, her cautious nature shining through. Pushing forward risks everything. We could drift silent, let them pass. But even she knew it was a long shot. Resource shortages had left them low on fuel, and evasion meant starvation in the black. Grun snorted, his defiance a low rumble. "Run, they signed our deaths. We signed theirs." He hefted his rifle, pointing to the nav charts flickering on Vex's screen. A nearby asteroid field, dense and unforgiving, offered cover if they could reach it. Hale waited, the pain a grounding fire. "Vex, plot the burn." Lyra prepped the decoys. "Grun, you're on guns." The order hung, decisive, pulling them from exhaustion into motion. As Vex punched coordinates, the Reliant groaned under thrust, engines straining against the void. Alarms blared, enemy locks acquiring. But Hale felt the shift, the camaraderie forging resolve. They weren't just surviving. They were rewriting the Council's fatal script. The first interceptor salvo grazed their shields, sparks dancing across the hull like fleeting stars. Vex whooped, a spark of his wit returning. "Evasive pattern Delta, hold on." Lyra braced at her station, fingers flying to launch the decoy flares, their ghostly trails blooming in the sensors. "They're buying it for now." Tension coiled in her voice, the risk of collision with the asteroids a razor edge. Grun's fire barked from the turret, precise bursts shearing an incoming drone. "More coming! Flank left!" His barks echoed, Braveheart unbowed. Hale gripped the command rail, side aching but ignored. The field rushed up, jagged rocks tumbling in silent chaos. One wrong nudge and they'd shatter like the Declaration's illusions. Vex's improvisation kicked in, a jury-rigged slingshot using the field's gravity well. "Engaging now!" The ship lurched, whipping through a narrow gap, debris pinging off the armor. An enemy craft followed too close, its hull crumpling against a boulder in a silent bloom of fire. Cheers erupted, ragged but real. But as they cleared the densest cluster, a new ping pierced the relief. A capital ship, Declaration's enforcer, vectoring in. Hale's jaw set. The cost mounted, fuel dipping critically, wounds reopening under G-forces. "We adapt or die," he muttered, eyes on the scopes. The team nodded, united in the grit, pushing toward the next impossible stand. Hale gripped the armrests as the scopes lit up with the capital ship's silhouette, a hulking behemoth, its engines flaring like distant suns. The display showed it closing the gap, weapons arrays powering up in a cascade of red icons. "Vex, plot an intercept course around that nebula remnant. We can't outrun its straight line." Vex's fingers danced over the console, his brow furrowed in concentration. The wiry engineer, always the quick thinker, nodded without looking up. On it, Captain. But fuel's at 12%. We'll be coasting on fumes if we dodge wrong. His voice carried that edge of caution, the kind that had saved them from worse scrapes before. Lyra, the team's sharpshooter, leaned forward from her station, her dark eyes scanning the tactical overlay. Brave to a fault, she never backed from a fight, but Hale saw the flicker of doubt in her clenched jaw. That thing's got point defense grids thicker than a hive wall. One shot from us won't dent it. We need to get creative. The ship hummed under them, thrusters firing in short bursts to arc toward the nebula's swirling gases. Debris from the field still trailed, pinging harmlessly against the hull, but the real threat loomed larger. Hale felt the pull of the decision weighing on him, the grit of command, the camaraderie that bound them through every near miss. They'd signed on for this rebellion against the Council's iron grip, but survival demanded more than defiance. A proximity alarm blared, cutting through the tension. The capital ship unleashed a salvo of seeker drones, tiny sparks streaking across the void. Evasive! Hale barked, yanking the yoke. The vessel twisted, engines straining as Lyra targeted the lead drone with a precise laser burst. It vaporized in a silent flash, but two more slipped through, latching onto their flank. Sparks erupted from a panel near Vex. Hull breach in engineering, sealing it now. He slapped a patch over the vent, sweat beading on his forehead. The air grew thick with the acrid tang of ozone, and Hale's wounds from the field escape throbbed under the sudden maneuvers. One drone detonated nearby, shaking the frame and dropping their shields to half. Lyra cursed under her breath, pivoting her turret. They're adapting, jamming our locks. Her shot clipped another's wing, sending it spiraling into the nebula's edge, where it fizzled out in the interference clouds. But the capital ship pressed on, its main cannon charging with an ominous glow. Hale's mind raced, sifting through options. The nebula could mask them, but entering blind meant risking the ship's integrity against unknown hazards. Vex, can we vent plasma from the core to fake a signature? Draw them off while we slip the net? Vex paused, then grinned faintly, the spark of ingenuity Hale relied on. Risky, but yeah. It'll overload the vents, but give us a ghost trail. He rerouted power with deft commands, the ship shuddering as superheated gas spewed from the sides, mimicking an engine failure. The capital ship veered toward the plume, drones peeling off to investigate. Hale eased the throttle, guiding them into the nebula's fringes. Colors warped around the viewport, pinks and blues twisting like living smoke. Sensors flickered, but they were ghosts now, hidden in the electromagnetic soup. Lyra exhaled, slumping back. That bought us time, but they're not fools. Fuel's down to 8%. We push deeper, we might not punch out. Hale nodded, eyes fixed on the fading lights of pursuit. The cost was etching deeper. Another scar on the hull, another drain on their dwindling reserves. But the team's resolve held, a quiet fire against the Council's endless machine. Deeper into the nebula they glided, the capital ship's engines a distant rumble. Hale allowed himself a breath. Adaptation wasn't just survival. It was their edge, human and unyielding. Yet as the gases thickened, a new anomaly pinged, something massive stirring in the haze, uncoiling like a predator roused from sleep. Hale's fingers tightened on the console as the anomaly bloomed across the screens, its silhouette twisting through the nebula's veil like a serpent shedding skin. What the hell is that? He muttered, voice low but edged with the grit that had kept them alive through 3 jumps already. Lyra leaned in, her eyes narrowing behind the glow of the readouts. She was the cautious one, always double-checking vectors before a burn, but now her hands flew across the auxiliary panel, pulling data from the interference. Not Council. Too organic in the scans. Wait, biosignature? It's alive, Hale. Massive, like it's been waiting in this soup. The ship shuddered faintly, a ripple from the thickening gases pressing against the hull. Jax, their engineer crammed into the tight engineering nook, piped up from the intercom. Engines holding, but if that's a predator species, we're not built for close encounters. Fuel's at 7.2 now. We dodge or we fight? Hale shot a glance at Lyra, who shook her head once, sharp. No time for debate. Dodge. Plot an evasive spiral. Use the density gradients to slingshot us clear. His order cut through the hum of the ship, decisive, born from too many scrapes where hesitation meant vapor. The anomaly uncoiled further, its form resolving into jagged limbs that pierced the haze, sensors picking up a low-frequency pulse that vibrated through the deck plates. Lyra's fingers danced, engines whining as they angled into the nebula's swirling currents. The creature, whatever it was, lunged, a pseudopod whipping out close enough that proximity alarms blared. "Impact in 10?" Jax yelled, his voice cracking with the strain of rerouting power. Hale gripped the armrests, feeling the ship's frame groan under the acceleration. They were humans, outgunned and outnumbered since the Council's declaration turned the stars against them. But they'd turned scraps into saviors before. This time, the nebula itself would be their ally. The pseudopod grazed the shields, a glancing blow that lit the viewport in electric blue. Sparks danced across the panels and Lyra cursed under her breath, stabilizing the weave. "Shields at 60%. It's adapting, matching our drift." Hale's mind raced, piecing together the anomaly from fragmented logs they'd scavenged on the run. "Ancient Guardian? Nebula Beast? Didn't matter. Jax, vent plasma from the exhaust ports, make a false trail. Lyra, invert our spin on my mark." "Copy," Jax grunted, the ship hiccuping as he complied. Lyra nodded, her face set in that quiet determination that had patched them through hull breaches and betrayal alike. The creature veered toward the plasma bloom, its massive form eclipsing the distant stars. Drawn by the heat signature like a moth to flame, Hale counted it down. "Mark!" Inertia flipped them hard, the world tumbling in the viewport as they spiraled away. The beast thrashed, confused, its limbs flailing through the decoy. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the ship's labored breathing. But the cost hit fast. Alarms wailed anew, fuel lines compromised from the strain. Jax's voice crackled. "We're leaking. Down to 5%. That dodge bought us distance, but we're limping now." Lyra slumped slightly, wiping sweat from her brow, but her eyes met Hale's with unyielding fire. They'd evaded the Council, stirred a nebula horror, and lived. Adaptation, human style. Improvise, endure. Deeper they pressed, the creature's rumble fading into the haze, but the leak ticked like a countdown. Hale allowed no doubt. They'd fix it or die trying. Hale gripped the console edge, his knuckles white against the flickering red lights. The fuel leak hissed faintly through the bulkhead, a venomous whisper in the dim cabin. He turned to Jax, who was already prying open a panel with a multi-tool, sparks dancing like fireflies in the low gravity. "Status on the lines?" Hale barked, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Jax didn't look up, his fingers delving into the tangle of conduits. "Ruptured secondary feed. Patch might hold for an hour, tops. We need to vent the excess or it'll ignite." Lyra hovered nearby, her cautious gaze scanning the readouts. Nebula's thinning ahead. "If we push thrusters now, we could coast to that asteroid cluster. Shelter there, maybe scavenge parts." The ship groaned as another pressure wave rippled through the hull, remnants of the beast's distant thrash. Hale nodded, calculating risks in his head. Push too hard and the leak becomes a bomb. Drift too long, and the Council's patrols sniff them out. "Do it, Jax, seal what you can." "Lyra, plot the burn." Jax grunted, slamming a clamp into place. Adrenaline sharpened his witty edge. "Sealing. But if this fails, I'm blaming your optimistic ass, Hale." A chuckle escaped Hale despite the tension, raw and human in the face of the void. He strapped into the pilot's chair, fingers flying over controls. The engines sputtered to life, a reluctant beast of their own, propelling them toward the jagged rocks glinting in the viewport. Alarms quieted to a murmur as they closed on the asteroids, but the fuel gauge dipped perilously low. Lyra's voice cut in, terse. "Incoming signature, Council drone." "It's pinging us," Hale's jaw tightened. The drone was a hunter, sleek and automated, programmed to tag fugitives like them. No time for subtlety. "Evasive pattern Delta. Jax, ready the decoy flares." The ship banked sharply, asteroids whipping past like bullets. The drone locked on, its laser pulse grazing their shields with a sizzle. Jax launched the flares, improvised junk rigged with emergency beacons, scattering false signals into the debris field. For a moment, chaos reigned. The drone veered, chasing ghosts among the rocks. Hale exhaled, guiding them into a narrow crevice on the largest asteroid. Dust clouds billowed around them as they settled, the hull creaking in protest. But victory soured quick. Scans revealed the asteroid wasn't barren. Veins of unstable crystal laced its core, humming with latent energy. Touch it wrong and the whole rock chain detonates. Lyra's eyes widened, her bravery flickering. "We're sitting on a powder keg. Repair here means risking a chain reaction." Jax wiped grime from his hands, his caution mirroring hers. "Or we bail now, leak be damned. Council's closing in." Hale stared at the viewport, the nebula's haze mocking their fragile perch. Human grit meant no surrender, but adaptation demanded a gamble. He pulled up schematics, mind racing. We mine the crystals. Controlled burst to cauterize the leak. Risky, but it'll seal us tight and throw the drone off our trail. Lyra hesitated, then nodded, her fire reigniting. I'll rig the extractors. Jax, cover me. They moved as one, tools clanging in the confined space. The crystals pulsed under Lyra's beam, fracturing with a sharp crack that echoed through the ship. Jax manned the turret, swiveling toward any shadow. Tension coiled as the first shard slotted into the fuel line. Heat flared, welding metal to crystal in a makeshift bond. The leak hissed once, then stilled. But the asteroid trembled, a low rumble building. The drone's ping returned, closer now, drawn by the energy spike. Go! Hale shouted, firing thrusters. They burst from the crevice, crystal's glow fading behind as the rock fractured in their wake. A blooming explosion that engulfed the drone in silent fire. The ship steadied, fuel holding steady at 3%. Jack slumped back, a grin cracking his face. That was insane. Worked, though. Lyra met Hale's gaze. The cost etched in her weary smile. Their path now scarred by the nebula's wrath. One step closer to the Council's heart. They pressed on, defiant sparks in the endless dark. Hale gripped the console as the nebula's tendrils clawed at the hull, painting the viewport in swirling violets and blacks. Alarms blared, a staccato rhythm that matched the pounding in his temples. Fuel's dipping below threshold, he barked, eyes flicking to the readout. 2% now, a razor-thin margin against the void. Jax leaned forward, sweat beading on his brow. Fingers dancing over auxiliary controls, rerouting power from life support. It'll get chilly, but it'll buy us time. His voice held that wiry edge, the kind that cut through panic without breaking. The ship shuddered, vents hissing as air recyclers dimmed. The cabin's hum fading to a whisper. Lyra braced against the bulkhead, her cautious gaze scanning the sensor sweep. A blip resolved into shape. Council interceptors, 3 of them, sleek predators slicing through the gas clouds like knives. They're vectoring in. 5 minutes out. We can't outrun them on this. She paused, then added softer. Not without a miracle. The first interceptor's beam lanced out, grazing their shields in a shower of sparks. Hale yanked the yoke, rolling the ship hard. Stars blurred into streaks, the nebula's haze their only veil. Jack's weapons hot. Target the lead one, disable, don't destroy. We need intel, not a dogfight. Copy that. Jax's hands blurred, jury-rigging the plasma cannons from scavenged parts. A low whine built, the makeshift array charging unevenly. He fired, the bolt shearing off the interceptor's wing in a burst of debris. The enemy craft spun, trailing fire, but its siblings closed fast, their formations tightening like a noose. Lyra's fingers flew across her station, pulling data from the wounded ship's black box. Their signatures matched the Declaration fleet. Armored for orbital strikes but vulnerable in atmosphere. Wait, no, we're deep space. She bit her lip, mind racing. The cabin chilled further, frost rimming the edges of the controls, breath fogging in quick puffs. Another beam struck true this time, buckling a panel near Hale's feet. Smoke curled up, acrid and biting. He coughed, sealing it with a slap of the emergency kit. Shields at 20%. Jax, give me something, anything. Jax's eyes narrowed, that inventive spark igniting. He patched into the nebula's electromagnetic soup, siphoning static for a decoy burst, overloading their sensors. Faking a warp signature, looks like we're jumping coreward. The ship groaned as he funneled the energy, hull plates vibrating under the strain. The interceptors veered, chasing the ghost signal into a denser cloud. Silence fell, broken only by the ship's labored breathing. Lyra exhaled, rubbing her arms against the cold. It worked. But they're looping back. 2 minutes. Hale nodded, jaw set. Then we improvise. Lyra, plot a slingshot around that gas giant fragment ahead. Use its gravity to whip us in close. He glanced at her, the weight of command in his steady voice. We hit them where it hurts, their command relay. She complied, the trajectory locking in with a soft chime. The ship dove, engines straining at 1% fuel, the fragment looming like a shattered moon. Jax whooped softly as they skimmed its surface, debris pinging off the hull. Relays exposed, firing now! Plasma lanced out, severing the lead interceptor's antenna in a clean arc. It listed, communications severed, broadcasting distress in the open channel. The others broke formation, hesitation rippling through their pursuit. But the cost mounted. A final beam clipped their aft thruster, fuel lines rupturing in a hiss of vapor. Alarms wailed anew, red lights bathing the bridge. Hale wrestled the controls, stabilizing their spin. "We're blind in the engines, Jax." "Working it," he grunted, diving into the access hatch, tools clanging. Lyra monitored the foe's retreat, their signatures fading into the nebula's embrace. Yet the ship's vitals flatlined one by one, power flickering, the cold deepening to bone-numbing. Jax emerged, face smeared with grease, a triumphant glint in his eye. Patched it with hull plating. "We're limping but alive." The engines coughed back to life, a ragged purr. Hale steered them clear, the fragment receding. The council ships were ghosts now, their declaration's edge blunted for the moment. But the nebula whispered threats, and their path to the heart grew narrower. Lyra met their eyes, resolve hardening. One step closer. They signed for war. We signed for survival. The nebula's heart pulsed like a wounded beast, its core a maelstrom of ionized gas and shattered stellar remnants. Hale gripped the controls, sweat beading on his brow as the Endurance shuddered through the thickening haze. Alarms wailed faintly now, subdued by Jax's makeshift fixes, but the ship's frame groaned under the strain, rivets popping like distant gunfire. Lyra scanned the forward array, her fingers dancing over the console. "Contacts inbound, 3 signatures, council interceptors. They're cutting us off from the relay station." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flicked to Hale, the unspoken weight of their dwindling options hanging between them. Jax wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, still reeking of scorched wiring. "Engines are at 60%. We push harder, we blow. But if we don't, they board us like the last run." He glanced at the bulkhead, where fresh scars from the fragment's graze marred the metal, a reminder of how close they'd come to drifting corpses. Hale nodded, jaw set. "No choice. Full burn on my mark." Lyra prepped the countermeasures. "Everything we've got left." He didn't wait for agreement. The Endurance lurched forward, thrusters flaring against the nebula's drag. The interceptors materialized on the scopes. Sleek predators closing in, their weapons hot and hungry. The first salvo lit the void, plasma bolts slicing through the gas clouds like lightning. Lyra triggered the chaff launchers, a cloud of reflective debris blooming ahead. One bolt veered, slamming into the nebula's edge and igniting a brief, furious bloom of violet fire. But the second grazed the hull, shearing off a sensor array and a spray of sparks. The ship bucked, lights dimming as auxiliary power kicked in. "Shields at 30. Jax barked, already scrambling back to the engineering crawlspace. "Rerouting everything, hold her steady." Hale wrestled the yoke, evading a third shot that scorched the viewport's edge. The interceptors fanned out, their formation tightening like a noose. In the heart's glow, their hulls gleamed with the Council's insignia, arrogant symbols of the declaration that had ignited this chase across the stars. Humans, branded as upstarts, now hunted in their own ingenuity's shadow. Lyra's mind raced, replaying the fragmented logs they'd stolen from the outer rim. The Council's war pact, signed in secrecy, dooming fringe worlds to subjugation. Their relay station ahead was the key, the broadcast array that could expose it all, rallying the scattered colonies. But reaching it meant threading the maelstrom's eye, where gravitational shears could rip a ship apart. An interceptor broke left, lining up for a kill shot. Hale banked hard, the Endurance protesting with a metallic screech. "Jax, we need more, anything." From the hatch, Jax's voice echoed, strained. "Got it, venting plasma from the auxiliary tanks. It'll mask us, but we're cooking down here." A hiss followed, then the ship belched a plume of superheated exhaust, blending with the nebula's fury. The sensors blurred, the lead interceptor firing blind and missing wide. Lyra seized the moment, locking onto the relay's docking clamps. "Docking in 30. If we link, we transmit, whole pact unravels." But the second interceptor adjusted, its beam weapons charging a focused lance. The Endurance dove, Hale's hands a blur. The maelstrom's tendrils whipped at them, hull plates buckling under tidal forces. Jax emerged coughing, face blackened. "Tanks empty. We're blind on aft sensors now." The interceptor's lance struck true, carving into the engineering nacelle. Explosions rippled through the deck, fire suppressants flooding the air with acrid foam. Jax staggered, clutching his side where shrapnel had bitten deep. "She's breaking, brace." Lyra's console sparked, data streams fracturing. Hale hauled the ship into a desperate spin, buying seconds. The third interceptor closed from starboard, but the nebula's core surged, a rogue plasma arc erupting like a solar flare. It engulfed the pursuer, hull melting in silent agony, debris scattering into the void. Hale aligned for the dock, clamps engaging with a thunderous jolt. The Endurance latched, trembling as the relay's ancient frame accepted the intrusion. Lyra punched the upload sequence, the stolen files flooding the array. Across the sector, signals would ripple, colonies awakening, alliances fracturing, but the remaining interceptor rammed them, momentum tearing the clamps free. The Endurance spun wild, jacks collapsing against a console, blood pooling. "Get it out, override the locks." Hale fired the maneuvering jets, a final improvisation from scavenged parts. The ship twisted, slamming the interceptor against a stellar remnant. Metal screamed, both vessels crumpling in a tangle of wreckage. The nebula's heart claimed the rest, pulling them into its crushing maw. Alarms silenced. Lyra helped Hale drag Jax to the med bay, the transmission complete. The Council would reel, their declaration exposed as the suicide pact it was. But the Endurance listed, life support flickering, their path home a gauntlet of reprisals. Hale sealed the bay door, eyes on the stars beyond. "We signed nothing but our own terms." They endured.